I think we're live, Bill.
There we
Finally,
go.
we had some technical difficulties, folks. If you're on here, I know that we had posted a to start at 6 o'clock. Some reason it wouldn't open up. We're gonna blame Facebook this time.
That's it.
If we can find out later, it's probably something not done. It usually is. But we just want to welcome you to the show today. We got a real treat for you. We've been talking about this for how long, Bill?
Oh, probably 18 months.
At least, and we've been talking about how to present this workshop, and we agreed to come across and with the title of transformational conflict, and how to transform conflict into useful communication, effective communication, isn't it? Because you know what, conflict's there, isn't it?
It is.
Sometimes we want to avoid it. Sometimes we head on into it headlong, and we cause ourselves more problems. So we really want to share some things with you. And I'm going to turn it over to Bill. I'm going to let him give you an overview of what we're going to talk about. And we're going to talk about this. But what I really want is from you as an audience, we need your feedback. We need you to talk to us. When we come across a concept, if we're not real clear about it, tell us to back up. We'll come back and talk about it. We have planned this for an hour. We hope to be able to do this in an hour. If not, we're going to stop and come back next Monday. So if we don't get it done today, we're going to get it done.
We'll get it done.
Yeah. So tell them a little bit about what we're going to learn about, Bill.
We're going to learn about the fears about and causes of unhealthy conflict, and what that unhealthy conflict might look like. And then we're going to talk about it. Is there such a thing as good conflict, and what is it, and what is bad conflict? And then
that's really important.
Yeah, you got to separate those two.
Yeah.
And then we're going to talk about 7 guiding principles to handle ourselves and handle the conflict.
Yeah.
And then we're going to have 7 key process action steps that you can use with those principles to guide your conflict to a good resolution.
Yeah, and resolve it and transform it into something useful for the future. And that's what this is about, isn't it?
Transforming conflict into results.
Yeah.
And then we're going to talk about Patrick Lencioni's models for healthy teams who engage in healthy conflict.
Bill, a lot of this workshop came from some of his concepts, his material, and I'd learned how to the action steps about how to resolve conflict. But when he come across with the mindset and the teaching of embracing healthy conflict, I thought, man, how can you get this two together? So this is what this workshop's about. It's about how to engage in healthy conflict and also take care of bad conflicts.
Right. At the end of the workshop, we'll know why we should seek that healthy conflict and not avoid conflict, but eliminate bad conflict.
Yeah. So let's talk about. Can we get the roll?
Yeah.
Here we go. So what do you think?
Well, there's why do we avoid conflict, and what actually causes that conflict?
Well, the biggest thing is fear. You and I have talked about this before. With my personality, I'm sort of like a D personality or an A on the Myers-Briggs, and I'm kind of aggressive toward things, and I don't let things be for the most part. I've learned how to let some things be as I've gotten older and a little wiser. But when I would see something wrong, I was going to engage into that, whatever it took. If it was conflict, I was going to argue. And I found out that I would kind of run over people. And how do you generally handle conflict?
Well, I don't know about Myers-Briggs, but on the Enneagram, I'm a type 9.
Okay.
Which is peacemaker. So, I kind of try to smooth things out and just avoid that conflict anytime I can.
Yeah. Okay. That's a good point. You said peacemaker.
Yeah.
Sometimes we fool ourselves by thinking by avoiding the conflict, we're creating peace.
Right.
But generally what happens is there's an elephant in the room that nobody's talking about.
We're delaying.
There's a problem that everybody's avoiding. Everybody knows it's there, but we don't do it. And then, folks like me, I'm sitting here pushing the envelope, trying to get everybody to look at the elephant in the room, and I run people off. So I had to learn how to engage in how to resolve conflict in a healthy way. But I had my own fears. When I realized I was doing that to people, I thought to myself, I don't want to hurt people. I don't want to harm people. I want us to work as a team. So then I was afraid to engage in conflict because I was afraid I was going to hurt people. But on the other end of the spectrum, some people avoid conflict because they're afraid they're going to get hurt, aren't they?
That's right.
So they stay away from it. So basically, some of those fears, let me see who's on before we get started here. All right, Mike Belcher, we say, buddy, Dave Dix, Junior Ward, Christian Walkett, Tina Quinn, Teddy Bennett, Katie Beckett. Thanks for joining us. We just kind of got started into transformational conflict, and you should be able to go back and catch the beginning of this, so I won't go too far back, but we're kind of getting into it right now, talking about the fears of engaging in conflict, why we don't deal with conflict. So the first thing is fear of not knowing how. Sometimes it's kind of like, how do I approach this? And then we talk ourselves out of it because we just don't know how, really. Fear of losing the conflict. Nobody wants to lose and come out on the short end. You come out on the short end enough times and you stay away from conflict altogether. Yeah. And Stephen Covey talks about that in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. He talks about the principle of a win-win. When we understand how to engage in negotiations and conflict, it's the leader's job to make sure that everybody wins in here. Because if I win over you every time, you see me coming, you're not going to help me, are you?
No.
And you're going to avoid me. So some people try to win all the time, and some people try not to lose, and it becomes unhealthy. All right, so they had the fear of being hurt or angered. They had the fear of others knowing that we had failed or had part in organizational failure. So we don't want to expose ourselves sometimes, so we just keep our mouths quiet and kind of shy off to the side. Fear of rejection or being singled out. Sometimes the person who's pushing the envelope gets a bad rap for being a troublemaker. So we avoid conflict for that reason. Fear of criticism, fear of being too aggressive or too passive. We just talked about that. And basically fear of change. Sometimes it's kind of like, if we just hold out, if I can hold out till the end of the day, or if I can hold out to the end of the week, if I can just hold out 2 more years till I get to retirement, not make too many waves, I'll be okay. And that makes a very negative work environment, makes a negative family culture too. And I'm going to talk about that in the family culture too, because these principles work in the family, they work on your workplace, they work at your church, they work in your community. There are principles that work in any dynamic where people are a team, and a family is a team.
Yeah.
You know, families are different. Sometimes you have a single mother, a single father, or you have 2 people cohabitating together, raising kids. But either way, everybody has a role. The family has a goal, so that makes the family a team, doesn't it?
That's it.
So these work in the family. So, Bill, what are some causes of conflict?
Well, first, we could have misalignment or disharmony at the top levels, and that could be, the management team. It could be 2 executives.
Mm-hmm.
They haven't resolved their conflict and carried it to a conclusion. So they're leading their teams in different directions, or maybe in the same direction, but competing with one another.
Can I stop you for a second? That is the number one reason for bad conflict. When the leadership team's not on the same page, and one leader's trying to turn the page without the other leader being on the page, same page.
That's right.
It causes a trickle down to everybody. It's raising kids, the parents, the children to play the one parent against the other ones, not on purpose. No. It's just in human nature.
It's the way it works.
And it works that way in the workplace too, doesn't it? So we have to be on the same page at the top before we can expect it to be solid at the bottom.
And another thing is lack of clarity.
Mm-hmm.
If everyone's not clear on what is going to be done and how it's going to be done and when, there's going to be conflict as to what things need to be done now.
Yeah.
So, lack of trust within an organization. If there's not trust in an organization, people can't express their wants, their desires, their thoughts, their beliefs. And if they can't express them, then they can't be resolved.
If I can't trust you with my ideas or being vulnerable with you, I'm probably going to shut down, or I'm going to try to win.
Or if you don't shut down, you may not be trying to win, but you're in the back of your mind, you're going to be thinking, I got a better way to do this.
Yeah.
And you're going to try that better way.
Maybe, or I just might put it in my back pocket.
And it might be a better way, but no one else knows about it.
I may take my idea somewhere else.
Yeah, and it may go somewhere else.
Yeah.
And you could be lack of a healthy executive team.
Mm-hmm.
If the executive team can't use conflict, transform it into results, then the whole organization is not going to be able to do the same thing.
Exactly.
differing opinions. We touched on that a little bit.
Hmm.
If you have a different opinion, but you don't feel like you can express it, then you're going to carry that opinion. It's going to kind of be a undercurrent.
Yeah.
And then resentment. Once again, when we can't express ourselves, or when no one will actually take us seriously sometimes, or we feel like they're not, we believe they're not taking us seriously, then we're going to resent that. And
Sometimes, I might have an idea, and I might not mind too much if you don't use my idea, but at least let me express it and flesh it
listen
out.
to it.
Yeah, if it's not a good idea, we can talk about it. But if I resent you, I'm not going to share my ideas with you. That's good.
And lack of resources. An organization can't do everything all the time. They've got to choose things that are important to do.
Yeah, you go ahead. I'm going to talk. I'm going to see who's on here. I think we had some folks join us.
And lack of clear direction or instruction. Earlier we talked about lack of clarity. We have to have clarity and instruction as well as in goals and objectives.
Yeah.
Clarity and means. And we might have poor performance by ourselves or other people. Poor performance is going to naturally occur, and we've got to accept it and move on. Try to make it better the next time. Not accept it in that, okay, we're just going to be poor all the time, poor performing. We're going to do better, but we have to forget, kind of have the grace to forgive ourselves of that poor performance.
And this really, and I don't want to get too far ahead in the lesson, but this right here is a biggie.
Yeah.
When I was in the retail business and I was a manager there, I had folks that, my team were great performers. I had people who were average performers. I had people who were poor performers. And if I would have a discussion about someone's poor performance with someone else before I had it with the one who's, having the poor performance, I violated trust. I caused a whole lot of negative conflict to be trickling downhill because I was afraid of confrontation, wasn't sure how I was going to deal with it. So I can chalk it up to, well, I'm just fleshing it out. I'm trying to get some advice. But when we talk across with our peers about how we're going to deal with poor performance before we talk to the poor performer, we're causing some distrust, aren't we? Bad conflict's going to come out of that. So that's good stuff. All right.
Do you have any examples of what happens when we avoid conflict?
I sure do, and I want to share it. I want to make sure I recognize everybody that's jumped on here. Hey, Brian, Sean Spencer, Terry joined, Susan. Hey, Susan, she gave a shout out to us. Carl Simmons, thanks for joining us. We're talking about how to transform conflict into useful and effective communication to get the results for our team. And we talked about the team being a family, our work unit. We talked about our church family. We talked about in the community. Anybody, anywhere where a certain group of people are operating together to accomplish a goal, we have a team, don't we? All right. So you asked me an example of bad conflict, and this is where someone was afraid to deal with confrontation and conflict, and it cost human lives. Several years ago, I think it was South Korean Airlines had a rash of some major airline crashes. And I can't remember the numbers exactly. I'd have to go back and dig those up. But between 1970 and 1999, there was probably a couple thousand people died in some major airline crashes. And they began to investigate, and they found out they had up-to-date equipment. They had state-of-the-art equipment, but they kept having these same crashes. So they actually, because of all the deaths and all the bad publicity, they went out and got a couple consulting firms, one from Germany and one from America, to come in and look at what was going on. And what they found out was it was a culture that was causing the crashes. You say, well, how can culture cause a crash? Here you go. Qualified pilots, you have qualified people on the ground, you have state-of-the-art equipment, but yet culture is causing crashes. Well, the culture in that company was that the younger folks were not allowed to speak to an elder and correct them, give them any kind of direction. It's just a culture. You don't talk to your parents, your grandparents, or any elder in any way to give constructive advice. So these pilots were being offended when someone from the ground would call in and say, you need to make some adjustments. So it got to the place where the folks on the ground would avoid communication with them. So they found out what the problem was. They retrained the entire force changed that culture that was predominant in that country, but they changed it in a company and they saved lives. Now that's how easy it is, because maybe we got a culture in our workplace, in our family, where we don't communicate. It's my way or the highway, and everybody else is a peon, and that's the way it goes. A dictatorship, or we have someone who's a weak leader and won't act on anything that's brought to them, so people just stop communicating, don't they? So that was a great example that when I found that how culture can really ruin our team. All right, we got a couple more on. All right, so Bill, let me ask you a question. Is there such a thing as good conflict?
Yeah.
And what does, and in the same question, what does bad conflict look like?
Well, what is good conflict? It takes a leader to seek the conflict out. And that sounds almost contradictory to what we've might have been taught, is that the leader actually seeks the conflict out rather than tries to manage it or resolve it.
Yeah.
Because the leader will use it and guide it for the benefit of the whole team and the organization. And that good conflict is going to focus on behaviors and situations. It's going to allow everyone to be real and admit their mistakes, their weaknesses, their shortcomings, even their fears. It's going to be healthy and sometimes even heated conflict. It's going to be debate from everyone involved. It's about decision making. It's about ideas. It's about people fighting for the best way forward, not necessarily their way, but the best way.
So what I hear you saying is, good conflict kind of separates the person's intentions, assumptions, and all these things, and focuses just on the behavior, doesn't it?
It does.
So that's a discipline, and when you're exercising that you exercise when you use these principles, and it takes practice, it takes work, it takes commitment to keep the emotions out. So
and it focuses on behavior also, but it also focuses on behavior non-judgmentally.
Yeah.
It's it's a pursuit of truth is what it is.
Yeah.
It's almost like you see a courtroom drama.
Mm-hmm.
There's ideally it's a prosecution and defense in conflict to find out what the truth is.
That's right.
And it's got to be committed individuals holding themselves and others accountable for the team's best efforts and results.
Yeah.
But then there's also unhealthy conflict.
Yeah. Well, let me talk a little bit about that. And it's kind of a flip flop, but sometimes we got to hear it and see it from both sides to see what it really looks like. So bad conflict focuses on people, their personalities, their motives, and their agendas. We're all human. We all work with people, and if we know them for a while, sometimes they got a track record, and we begin to make judgment calls about what that person's motive is. This person's up to this, trying to work things out, and maybe they are, but we can't assume that off the get-go, because what happens is, as soon as I point out my judgment, that person digs in their heels and starts to defend their intentions, and we lose track and get away from the behavior. So it focuses on bad conflict is focuses on the people and their intentions. It's politically driven. Bad conflict is always trying to get that edge, trying to get one on top of the other, or trying to get ahead of the other person. It's not win-win. It's ego-centered. It exists when no one, especially the executive leadership team, is honest about their weaknesses. If I'm the leader and I can't admit to my team that I've got some fears, I got some doubts, there's some things I can't do, then I'm telling my team that's how you're supposed to act. Yeah. Don't show your weaknesses. So I have to be the leader. I have to go first and admit, hey, we're a team. I got my weaknesses. I got my strengths. You've got yours. Let's talk about them. I need you to help me with my weaknesses, and I need you to let me help you with yours. So bad conflict is hidden in plain sight. And what I mean by that is, as a leader, sometimes you may be able to pick up some negative energy, but you really can't put your finger on what's going on with the team. But the team's not operating as a unit because the results are not there. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So bad conflict is really conflict not handled the right way. That's right. What bad conflict is. All right. So Bill, tell us how to make conflict work for you. How do you transform that conflict into something good?
Well, the first thing we need to remember is, there's 7 principles that we hope to give to you that can guide you in making conflict work for you. number one is to focus on the situation and behavior, not on the
Mhm.
person. And that's important that we focus on things that are done, not people that are doing them.
Right.
Work to maintain the self-esteem and confidence of everyone involved. And that goes back to, focus on the behaviors, but focus on non-judgmentally.
And this is where you got to know your team, man.
Yeah.
You can't go around just passing out compliments and
Right.
and
Right.
like candy and trying to blow somebody up so you can take them down a couple notches. You got to be genuine in the fact that, hey, you've added some value and you're really good at this. I appreciate that, but we need to talk about this
Yeah.
behavior. Yeah, that's good.
And, we got to maintain constructive relationships. That's an important thing because a lot of time conflict is not about what's out there, but what's not said.
Yeah.
And sometimes what's not said is not even intended, but it's something that I might make up in my own imagination. I assume that you were
Yeah.
going to say this and you didn't want to.
Right.
You know,
And it comes back to the staying on the situation and behavior, not on the intentions of
Right.
it. Yeah.
and, conflict, we want to make things better. Take the initiative to, like we were talking about the lead earlier, seek that out,
Yeah.
seek that conflict out. Be a leader who leads by example. If you're not doing what you're teaching something else.
Exactly.
So,
yeah.
Keep the end in mind. And, that's back to one of Stephen Covey's principles. You think ahead of time, where do I want to be? Do I want to be in a better place or do I want to win the conflict?
If
Or do I want the organization to be in a better place or do I want to?
right, if I'm always trying to win, if I'm the guy who's always trying to win the argument, thinking ahead, how's that going to affect the rest of the team?
Yeah.
Are they going to avoid me? Or are they going to be combative? So thinking about the future is very important about how we handle it this time, isn't it?
And empower others to repeat this process in the future, because if you can transform your conflict into results, think about if you model that for 6 people under you and they transform it into results for the team.
That's how you change an organization. That's how you change a culture. If I'm good at resolving conflict, but I'm always the one who's resolving the conflict and not empowering you to do it or someone else on the team, then when I go away, the bad conflict comes back, doesn't it? Yeah. So that's great, Bill. I appreciate you sharing those 7 principles. Now let me give you an overview of the 7 action steps to take. Pretty simple. Now I'll say simple in the fact that, they're easy to remember. We can write these down. You can even have them in a little cue card when you get ready to have a difficult conversation, but they're not always easy to implement because we're human and we have emotions and people and things can draw us off. So the 7 action steps is number 1, open the discussion effectively. And we'll talk about that more in here about how to do that. That's key. If you're upset and I come down to the floor and I've got to talk to you about something that happened last week, I didn't open that discussion effectively. No. So we'll talk about that. Number 2 is clarify the situation. Let's get some, and that doesn't mean me always telling you what I saw. It means me telling you what I saw, but also asking you what you saw and what you heard. Number 3 is remain objective. That's a discipline. I have to be aware of my own biases. We all come into it with biases and subjective ideas and opinions. Number 4 is stay focused on the resolution. The whole goal is not to win, it's to resolve, isn't it?
That's right.
Number 5 is develop the ideas of others. Now, if we get this far in the process and everybody's calmed down, we start talking about solutions, we start accepting the ideas of other people, get people into it so they own the idea. Number 6, initiate action by implementing the plan. We can talk about it all we want.
Yeah.
But once we get the plan, it's time to move, isn't it? And number 7, close the discussion with clear summaries. So we talked a lot. We've worked out some things. Let's come back and recap, make sure we're on the same page. Now, I just want to touch on this a little bit. We talked about Patrick Lenciani's model. And a lot of the teaching that we've developed in here come from his concepts and ideas. They're not his uniquely, but he put them together in a pyramid type style to teach. And I use those myself personally, but they're really powerful to understand. If I don't have good conflict, I don't have real trust, do I?
No.
And if I don't have trust, I don't get commitment.
Then you're going to have good conflict.
And if I don't get commitment, I'm not going to have accountability individually and as a team. And if I don't have that, I'm not going to get collective results, am I? So good conflict is necessary to get
Yeah.
all those elements. All right. Bill, why should we eliminate that bad conflict?
Well, if we don't eliminate the bad conflict, there's going to be absence of trust.
Yeah.
No one's going to trust anyone. And it's all big going to be built on status and ego, and everybody's going to try to get ahead for themselves, not for the team.
Right.
It's going to be low standards, and there will be no accountability. When there won't be any excellence in the organization.
Exactly.
And ambiguity, there's lack of commitment, there's ambiguity, people aren't clear. Is the best thing to make the customer happy, or is the best thing to what is the best thing to do? What is the team supposed to be doing?
If we don't have clarity and we're in the middle of conflict, it can go on and on. And it can get really ugly, can it?
Yeah, because there may be no resolutions. There's no clarity.
Exactly.
And there's fear of conflict is going to leave us with an artificial harmony.
Right.
It's going to look like things are nice, but under the surface, there's going to be a lot of tension.
And as long as you're the boss and you're there, people are going to cooperate. They'll do
Yeah.
their jobs. But when you walk away, if the bad conflict's not resolved, we don't get any real collaboration. People don't aggressively work toward that goal when they can't get along and they don't like each other.
Yeah.
So we got to resolve that conflict.
And this is important for the leader, because they don't want to have to be there all the time. They want to have some time off.
Exactly.
So,
all right.
What must happen before a team can engage in healthy conflict?
Well, all right. I'm glad you asked that, because this is where the meat comes in. If we don't have this element right here, it all falls apart.
Yeah.
So this is important. So if you're at home and you're taking notes on this, I really want you to get these 6 pieces right here. First off, you got to answer 6 questions with absolute clarity. I don't care who you are. If you're on a personal growth plan for yourself and you're trying to achieve a goal or trying to grow and move forward and succeed, you have to ask yourself these 6 questions. If you're a family, if you're a team of any kind, you have to have the answers to this. Number 1, why do we exist? What are we here for? That has to do with purpose, doesn't it? And why do we even exist? So number 2 is, how do we behave? So now we know why we're here. What are my core values? What guides my actions? So I have to know what the core values of the company is, the team. I have to know what my core values are, so it won't get too far off course and get myself hurt. The third question is, what do we do? That sounds kind of silly, doesn't it? What do we do? Well, that just kind of answers the question of the specific service or the product the organization provides. So how's that operate in a family? Well, what's the family here for? If we can't answer that question, why our family exists, how are we going to know where we're going to go with our family?
Right.
Excuse me. Does that make sense? Number 4 is, how will we succeed? And this answers the strategy question. So we know why we exist. We know what guides our behavior. We know what we do, what each person does. How will we succeed? And this answers that strategy question, so we can begin to plan how we're going to achieve our goals. Number 5 is, what is most important right now? Now, this answers the priority question. It's the long range, the intermediate, and the short term goals. Everybody has a long term goal that hopefully that they're trying to achieve. Those goals breaking down comes down to intermediate goals and small goals. And sometimes there's periods of times when we're all working on one specific goal.
Yeah.
This is the monthly theme, the weekly theme. This is our theme for today. If we're not communicating that, then there's a whole lot of ambiguity, like you said, and the team starts to dissolve. They start to go off and do their own thing. Someone has to bring them back and get them into that. So number 6 is, who must do what? Now, this answers the teamwork and the role question. And I love what John Maxwell says in his book, The 17 Laws of Teamwork. He says, the role was never more important than the goal. Sometimes we don't really believe that for ourselves. When we become self-centered, we become it's about me. And when we get emotional and conflict's not going too good, we can get in that role where we think that we're more important than the team is. Our ideas are more important than the team's. So then we have to remind ourselves, what's the goal? What are we here for? It happens in church. What's church for? Why do we go to church? If we can't answer that question, then everybody's kind of doing their own little thing, aren't they? And it's hard to steer a bunch of folks going in every which direction.
And that's why you have different churches too. Some people are there for different reasons. So.
Right. So 6 questions. Why do we exist? How do we behave? What do we do? How will we succeed? What's most important right now? And who must do what? 6 questions you got to answer. All right. So let's see what time we got here. We got about a half an hour. What do you think?
I think we can go ahead and
I think we can do it, can't we? All right. Well, we'll go through these principles one by one, and kind of give you some meat. Fill some meat around these bones here a little bit. So, Bill, why don't you tell us about step number 1?
Step number 1 is to open your discussion effectively. And we have to explain the purpose of the discussion. And we got to come in and say, this is what's going on. These are the things that I've seen.
Mm-hmm.
What have you seen? And we need to be able to resolve this out and figure it out to a conclusion that's beneficial for the team. And we got to remember the 7 principles that are going to guide us in that discussion. And, with opening the discussion, important was is to make things better. We're doing this and taking initiative to do this so that our team will perform at a higher level. And that's why we have to state the discussion's importance up front and ask for and gain commitment to resolve the conflict early in the discussion. We want to set up the expectation that this discussion is not going to open the conflict, but this is going to solve the conflict. So this is not just beginning. This is going to be the whole process to end it. We don't want to rush the process. We don't want to enter the discussion when emotions are high, but we do want to set the expectation, of a leader who leads by example. That's another principle.
Yeah.
We want that we're going to sit down today at this time and resolve and transform this conflict.
Now, you said something important there. It says, avoid entering the discussion when the emotions are high.
Yeah.
Sometimes we can't. Sometimes it has to be handled right now. So
Right.
It takes a lot of discipline there.
It does.
When the emotions are high, because we're not thinking as clear as we can when we're calmed down.
Right.
So anytime we can avoid doing it when emotions are high, we want to, don't we?
That's right.
But it's not always possible. Let's see who joined us here, Bill. I think Ross Hanna, buddy, he says, what I find is that most people only function in the short term. They're only trying to get by. How do you move from short-term to long-term goals? That's a good question, Ross. It's a great question, because if we're not real clear about our long-term goal, we give up.
We do.
We're not persistent. This is a whole nother lesson. I'm glad he asked that question, because before long, I want to do a lesson on persistence, because if we're real clear about the main goal, we have to set little short goals to get there, don't we? It's kind of like maybe going from Toronto to Atlanta. If you're driving it, where we're going to stop at? We're going to stop in Michigan. We're going to stop down in Tennessee. Where we're going to stop at? We have to plan those stops ahead of time. So when we set those goals, those realistic goals, we set a goal that should stretch us, to make us better. Goals that we're not sure we can achieve. Goals that we know we're going to have help with.
Yeah.
And so then we do the little short goals that we know we can do and keep moving toward that and build that momentum. So map it out. That's why communication is so important. That's why planning is so important. That's the one thing we leave out, because planning is not easy. Finding out what we really, really want is not easy.
Yeah. And for this, Ross, I think the important thing here is the vision and mission of the team.
Yeah.
I mean, vision and mission is where you get the goals.
And it works on the same on the individual
It
level.
works on the individual level.
What's your goal, man? What do you want to achieve with your life?
Yeah.
And this is what we teach a lot of our classes about purpose, mission, vision, and it's always refining, and it always seems to be changing shape. But we have to have some kind of idea of where we want to go and what we want to achieve. Because you know what? It's never going to look exactly like we planned.
Oh, no.
It can be better. We can come up a little short, but at least we're closer to it than we
That's
was
right.
when we first started. So thanks for asking that question. All right. We got some other folks. Kelly, your daughter's on.
Hey, Kelly.
Leanne's on. Montgomery, Robbie Hart, Caleb Hamry. Hey, folks, glad to have you. If you just joined us, I really hope that you go back and watch this video from the beginning after it's over, because we've shared a lot of things that lay the premise for what we're teaching here in context. So we're talking about right now. We're talking about 7 key action steps to resolve conflict. And Bill just talked about number 1, which was open discussion effectively. And when you shared those principles, you shared the step, and then the principles you use it. All 7 of these principles we talked about apply.
They all apply,
but some of them apply a little more specifically. Right. So with that one, you open the discussion effectively. You said make things better, take the initiative, and be the leader who sets the example.
Right.
So I love how you tied that in. All right. Now, step number 2 is clarify the situation. Well, let me tell you, buddy, I know exactly what happened. This is what I saw. I don't need your opinion. I already know. We're done, aren't we? We're done. We may fix it right now.
Yeah.
For this moment, just for a few minutes, but you're going to go away. You're going to be upset because you know what? I didn't see the whole situation. I'm not in your head. I don't see your eyes with your eyes. I don't hear with your ears.
And then even worse, you discounted me out of this
equation.
Out of the equation to begin.
I just devalued you, didn't I? Your input. So clarifying the situation doesn't mean the boss always lays out what he thinks happened. So
it's more of an investigative process.
There you go. It is. So, and this is where it gets a little tough. This is the reason people avoid conflict.
Yeah.
Because it's a process and it takes work.
Sometimes we have to change our mind.
We do, don't we? Sometimes we have to realize I might have been wrong.
Yeah, I might have been.
So to clarify the situation, exchange each other's perspective about the situation, hear with your ears and listen with your heart. You got to get the emotions down, because if you're upset and you're uptight, that heart and that head's not connecting and we're not hearing right. So empathize when necessary, agree with how they may feel, but don't agree with their assumptions yet. Just stick. You remember the old dragnet? Just the facts, ma'am. Just the facts, ma'am. I want to know the facts. And so as a leader, we have to keep bringing people back. Just tell me what happened specifically, not what your idea of what happened was, or
what you thought happened.
What happened. So once you clarify, you come back and summarize what everybody thinks they saw or heard. Now, the principles that you want to really apply here, of the 7 principles, is focus on the situation and behavior, not on the person. So when you're clarifying the situation, you can't get into assumptions and intentions. You got to stick to the facts. And some things to avoid. So avoid exploring ideas and assumptions or opinions right here yet. We're not that far into the conversation. And don't deny or minimize somebody's emotions. As a leader sometimes, and I was low on empathy at one time. Because I was arrogant, I was selfish, I was self-centered, I was narcissistic. I had a lot of bad qualities as a leader when I started out. Didn't know it, so I made some bad calls when it comes to people who had emotions that were evident, and I'll downplay their emotions. People respond differently than I do, or different ones, and I would downplay their emotions and discount their feelings. And when you do that, when you discount someone's feelings, you're done, because people will remember you a lot longer for how you make them feel than what you actually said.
That's right.
Isn't it? So when someone doesn't like, when someone comes around that doesn't make me feel good about myself, I really don't want to be around that person. Do you?
No.
Well, tell us about step number 3, Bill.
Step number 3, this is where we have to remain objective. It's objectively stating the case. We got to be aware of our biases here. We all have biases, whether we realize them or not. So it's best that we try to figure them out what they are, and work to stay as close to 100% objective as we can. State the stakes that are involved concerning the resolution of the conflict.
Mm-hmm.
What are the benefits? What are the consequences if we resolve this, or if we don't? What's going to happen if we aren't able to do something about this? What is going to happen?
Yeah, we can't just leave it.
Yeah.
We're going to deal with it. Yeah.
And, we've got to allow equal airtime. Everybody has to at least know that they've been heard. You're not necessarily giving everyone equal consideration. I mean, you may not be considering each possible objective or alternative equally, but you have to give everyone the chance to state their alternatives.
There's folks like me who like to talk.
Yeah.
And when in a group, when we're resolving a conflict, I might be one of those people who kind of takes more time than needed.
Yeah.
Someone has to calm me down and say, that's good, Dave, but I need to hear from Bill. I
Yeah.
need to hear from, so we got to make sure they're moderating that time correctly.
And that's important, because if people aren't heard, they won't commit themselves to the resolution.
Exactly.
We need to brainstorm together ideas for the resolution and not reject any ideas initially.
Hmm.
Get all these ideas down, and it's best to get them down
It
on
may
paper.
it may sound dumb until
Yeah.
we hear it fleshed out, and we ain't got time for it. But I love the little story about the balloon festival the lady had.
Yeah,
About being a bad idea to get kids in church, but maybe it wasn't such a bad
that
idea.
wasn't.
Yeah.
And it's good to get these things written down, at least maybe not on paper, but at least on slick board somewhere. Agree on the best solution together. Make sure it aligns with the core values of the team and overall purpose of the organization.
That's why it's so important to communicate those things over
Yes.
and over, and base every behavior and action on those.
Over communicate.
Yeah, over communicate. Yeah.
And show genuine appreciation for everyone's support. If people don't think that their input is appreciated or valued, they're going to tend to quit giving it.
That's exactly right.
Because it may not seem like it's a lot to us, but when that person's doing it, they're risking. They feel like they're risking.
They're being vulnerable,
some
aren't
themselves. Yes.
Well, tell us how the principles that tie in with these steps, Bill.
Well, we want to focus on situation and behavior, not on the people again.
Yeah.
We want to work to maintain the self-esteem and confidence of everyone involved. We want people to feel good about, working with that team.
Yeah.
And we want to maintain constructive relationships, because not only do we have this conflict to transform, but we're going to have conflict in the future.
Yeah.
And what we really want to avoid doing is leading others to our ideas, trying to manipulate them, and using our position or our power or our influence to win the conflict.
Yeah, and that'll happen.
It does.
Especially if, as a leader, I don't give my team permission to speak back
Yeah.
and say, I think you're doing that, Dave. If they're afraid to tell me that that's what they see, then they're going to back up.
Yeah.
And I'm going to try to lead people to
And
my
that's
ideas.
why it's important to know our own biases, because we will step into that.
Hey, got some folks here giving us a shout. Ross is leaving us, said his phone's about to die. Sorry, Ross. Leanne says hi. Hey, Leanne. Thanks for joining us. Travis Osborne just joined us. Steve Brooks just joined us. How you doing, guys? We're talking about how to transform conflict into effective communication and making our team better. Taking bad conflict, turn it into good conflict, and strengthen us and find better ways forward. All right. So if you missed, I'm sure you missed the first part of this. You want to go back and watch the thing from beginning to end.
Yeah.
We worked about a year and a half on this, and I've used these principles myself, so I know they work.
They work.
And I'm a kind of a high strung kind of guy. And when I get going, I didn't handle conflict very well in my early days. And so these principles actually saved a lot of relationships for me. It saved my job in a few times too, because I understood how to work with people better. So you want to learn these. All right. So step number 4 is stay focused on the resolution. We can get drift, especially if we got more than 2 or 3 people in the group trying to work out this conflict, and we can get sidetracked. So someone's got to be responsible to keep us coming back to it. So come back as many times as necessary to the original reason for the discussion. Let's say, hey, well, guys, this is not where we started. And we got some folks that are professionals that going back 2 years ago and bringing up dirty laundry. Table that somewhere. So we can talk about that later if we need to, but right now we're going to stay with this. This is the issue, the behavior we're focusing on. So it's easy to get drawn off course by others who bring up the past. B is set or remind others of the ground rules. We talked about equal airtime.
Yeah.
Listen, I want to hear your ideas, but I don't want you talking 10 minutes and talking over top of people. Let them speak. So we got to set the ground rules. Everyone speaks and everybody weighs in. No interrupting others, and admit your mistake if you violate the rules and begin again. So if you're the leader and you violate the rules, the best thing to do is say, hey, I just violated my own rule. Time out. I'm sorry. Let's retrack and get back on course. So the principles that you tie in with this, they really tie in well. Of course, like I said, they all do, but these 2 right here tie in the most. Number 1 is focus on the situation and behavior and not on the person. And the 5th principle was be a leader who leads by example. And the one thing that you really want to avoid is being defensive and making assumptions in this. We don't want to get drawn out making our assumptions, because it's easy to get, especially if someone's got a track record of messing up in the past and we finally deal with it. We can make some assumptions that may be totally wrong. and be completely off base. So tell us step number 5, Bill.
Step number 5 is where we have to develop the ideas of others. And that's where we have to evaluate ideas together, as a team, and also ideas, how the ideas fit together.
So right here, we've got pretty far into this conversation. We're keeping everybody on track. We've reminded everybody the ground rules. We know what the values and the mission is. We know what we're after. So now this is getting important.
Now we're developing next action steps.
Yeah.
We might have to revisit the purpose of the meeting here.
Mm-hmm.
What are these ideas supposed to be? What are they transforming?
Right.
We need to see our biases, the biases of other people. Not necessarily calling them out here, but at least see them.
Yeah.
Poll the group and choose the idea solution that everyone agrees to commit to. If it's, remind everyone of the benefits of this and the necessity of resolving this. But even if the group doesn't come up with the ideal solution, they're going to come up with a solution that everyone will commit to.
Yeah.
And, that patent quote, a bad plan executed today is better than the perfect plan executed next week.
And we have to remind them there are consequences if we don't get this resolved.
Right.
Yeah.
And the 7 principles that they're going to guide you in this. Number 2, work to maintain the self-esteem and confidence of everyone involved. And number 3, maintain constructive relationships. And once again, we're trying to avoid leading others to our own biased opinion or idea. If it's not mutually agreed upon, it's the best way forward. You're going to lack commitment from some people, and that lack of commitment is going to sabotage the whole thing. So self-awareness on the leader's part is critical in this stuff.
It's very, very critical. Someone has to be the leader in this.
Yes.
Someone has to take the initiative. It's one of the principles in it. Someone's got to step up and lead by example.
And sometimes being the leader, you have to apply the law of sacrifice, and you give up some of your rights to express, to advocate for your opinion.
For your opinion, yeah.
Yes.
So step number 6, initiate action by implementing the plan. Sounds pretty simple, doesn't it?
It does.
But we can talk about it all day. We can come up with the grandest plans, but unless we have a determination to put the plan in place immediately, all that great talk can go by the wayside.
When everything's said and done, more will be said than done.
Yeah, I love that, Bill. All right. So first off, you move into action immediately and set a timeline for the change that you agreed on. If someone's behavior, let's say someone's, let's take an example. Maybe someone's 10 minutes late every day. And we say, well, okay, what are you going to do to resolve that? How are you going to fix that? That violates our principles, our team. It's hurting the team. So how are we going to fix that? And we give a time frame about when that's going to take place. Well, guess what? Tomorrow I'm going to be 10 minutes late anyway because I got to drop off the kids at school. Okay, now how are you going to fix that? What kind of plan are you going to put in place for next week? I need to know when we can get this resolved. So we got to set some timelines so we can come back and measure our progress. All right, remind everybody of the original commitment to resolve the conflict. We get that commitment at the front. We remind everybody of that and allow others to monitor their own progress and set a time to report it. So some things we're not going to go checking all the time with their back and micromanage. We're going to say, come see me Friday and tell me how you've done. Did you get this resolved? And let them report on their own progress. So of the 7 principles, principle number 2 is work to maintain the self-esteem and the confidence of everybody involved. And you do that when you allow them to monitor their own progress. And principle number 7 is empower others to repeat this process in the future. So you want to model it, you want to teach it, and you expect everybody else to model it and teach it. So it gets a trickle-down effect and throughout the team and the organization. It changes the culture, doesn't it? So some things to avoid is avoid a stalemate. If it comes to we get locked up, someone's got to make a decision about how we're going to move forward with this. So the boss has to step up and say, well, this is how it is. It's going to be right now until we come up with a better idea, because this is the goals. This are our values. This is what we do. This is what we're trying to produce. We are a team, and we got to move forward. So until you come up with a better idea, my idea is going to have to work for right now. So avoid the stalemate. All right. Explain possible misunderstandings. Consensus is not always the goal. It's not to get everybody to agree just to agree. Right. It's to come to the best solution that fits our purpose and our goal. So keeping the company goals and objectives at the forefront is important. Keeping the family goals, values to the forefront is important, isn't it?
Yeah.
All right. So tell us about step number 7, Bill.
Step number 7, we've gone through all these other 6 steps.
Yeah.
We've actually come up with some ideas. We've set some timelines. We know some action steps that are going to be taken. So now what we need to do is close the discussion with clear summaries. We need to recap the agreement or plan.
You gonna tell me all this again? You mean
we're going to over communicate?
We're going to over communicate, aren't we? There you go.
Because when emotion's been high, there's a high likelihood that someone missed something, misunderstood something, or heard something that wasn't said.
I'm a pretty smart guy. I think I got it the first time, Bill.
Let's just make sure you explain it to me then, so that I'll make sure that I had it right.
There you go. As a perfect example, because sometimes we walk away with misconceptions.
That's right.
That's great.
Because the problem with communication is the illusion that it's occurred.
I love that quote. We think we've communicated. We think everybody's on there, and guess what? Nobody really got it, did they?
That's right. Check for clarity and understanding. And do this by allowing others to speak the recap to the group. And I think a good idea is make sure everyone verbally commits to working on the plan. Don't say, are there any objections, but say, but make the person affirmatively say, I'm committed.
Yeah, asking open-ended questions is the best way to do that. What objections do you have? What are you not understanding? Or what did you hear?
And if you have none, say, I have none.
But if you say, do you agree? Are you committed? And they say, yes. They might be just telling you that because they're not sure. They don't want to stand out. So we got to get some open-ended questions.
Closed-ended questions are always usually bad.
Right.
Not always, usually. Schedule a follow-up brief meeting to check progress. And that was something that we did earlier. We set up, people are going to monitor and report their progress back. They're going to self-monitor.
Yeah.
So give them, schedule that time.
So if you're a leader, put it on your to-do list. This is very important.
And put it on your calendar.
If you don't follow up, what you're saying is it's not important.
And this was a waste of time that we spent.
Yeah.
And you remind others to be leaders moving forward and resolving conflict within the team and within their teams.
Yeah.
Once again, we're not trying to rush the process, but we do need to have some sort of resolution, because if we have, back to the earlier one, if we had a stalemate, people are going to say, here they come. They're going to waste our time again.
Waste our time again. There you go.
And the 7 principles guiding us here, the 3 important ones: be a leader who leads by example. Keep the end in mind. Think beyond the right now and the moment into the future of the team. And empower others to repeat this process in the future. Multiply that.
This is one of my biggies right here, because it's so important as a leader. If you walk away and you're the only one who can do this, you just
make work for yourself.
You just crippled the team.
Yeah.
You really walked away and crippled the team when you left. So to teach people how to do it so they can do it for themselves when you're not around. So we're getting ready to sum this up. We're about out of our hour limit, and I think we've done pretty good tonight. Bill, keeping on time. Let's see who else joined us. Spencer Thomas, hey, Shirley Massey, Sean Persinger, Sandra Ryder, Marshall Sanford. Thanks for joining us. Now I know you kind of jumped in a little bit late, but that's okay. I really want you to, if you really want to resolve conflict and understand how to do it, go back and watch this from the beginning. Yep. And I'm going to give you an invitation here a little bit to send me your email, and I'll send you the PowerPoint guide here so that you can actually use this to help your team. All I want to do is empower you and add value to you. This is free. This one here is free. We're going to do a half-day workshop where we involve people live. But this one right here, you can take it right where you're at, begin to apply it, and make your life better, your family's life better, your team's life better. So you definitely want to use them. All right, so once the team can answer those 6 questions that we asked before, Bill, do you remember what some of those questions were?
Why do we exist?
Question number 1 is, it's important, isn't it?
Yeah. How do we behave? What are the parameters of our behavior? What do we do? How will we succeed?
What sets us apart? How are we going to strategize with that?
What's important right now?
Yeah.
And who must do what?
If we don't know the answers to those questions, we're leaving people in the dark, and we're leaving people up to make assumptions, and we're usually going to get it wrong if we don't know. So when we do that, we can build trust. We gain commitment when we got trust. Then we can handle conflict in a healthy way. And we become accountable to ourselves and each other as a team, and we get collective results. So communication within the team is so important. And you know what? Conflict is always kind of scary. It really is, man. I know that, when you got to encounter someone with a strong personality, or you got to encounter someone who gets their feelings hurt a lot, a lot goes through your mind, but it has to be resolved Because if it doesn't, it just begins to fester and grow, doesn't it? Just kind of trickles out, sets a culture, and pretty soon we're all in trouble. All right. So, Bill, let's sum it up a little bit. Tell them a few things about what we're going to do.
Well, healthy teams are going to argue. They're going to fight for the best ideas and ways forward rather than each other.
Yeah.
Unhealthy teams are going to fight each other or avoid each other altogether. Only vulnerable leaders can help, their team by being vulnerable enough to open up and admit their shortcomings and weaknesses. And that's going to, model it for the team members. When that culture exists, the team's going to be able to share their thoughts without fear of being ridiculed, rejected, shut down. And when that happens, when that occurs, great things can happen.
Let me stop you there because this is critical. Vulnerability-based trust is so critical. So if you're a leader, if you're a parent, if you're a team leader, and I'm not saying you go around acting like you're incompetent. I can't do that. I can't do that. I don't know how to do that. That's incompetence.
Right.
But when you can walk up to your team, you say, man, I struggle here. I don't listen real well. I'm sorry. I get distracted and don't listen real well. So when you don't think I'm listening to you, please let me know. I want to know so I can respect you and value you. When you do that, you set the tone for the rest of the team to say, hey, I got some weaknesses too. If the boss can do it, then, I can do it too.
Yeah.
The boss is not going to let anybody crucify me because of my weakness. So it's so important to set that tone and be vulnerable as a leader. What about firefighting?
Well, if we don't handle conflict and use conflict and transform it into results, what we're going to be doing is unhealthy conflict. And that means that we're going to put out fires.
All the time.
All the time. Because every time that someone disagrees, there's going to be conflict that has to be, put out.
You're going to be running around with a bucket of water or a bucket of gas all the time, aren't you?
So, yeah, that's right.
And you're going to have to decide which one you're going to use all the time. And that gets old quick when you have to resolve all the conflict.
If we have a culture that prevents personal conflict and works on transformational conflict, then it's going to bring trust, it's going to bring commitment, accountability, results.
Exactly. Spencer gives us a shout out, said hello. Hey, Spencer. Glad you joined us. Hadn't seen you for a while. It's good to see you on here. This is a 1 hour workshop. I know that you caught the tail end of it. Go back and watch this thing from beginning to end. Do yourself a favor, not because we're doing it, but because these principles work. All right. Well, Bill, it's been really good. Our hour's been about up. Now, I really want to get this in your hands if you want to use it. I really do. So private message me, send me your email address, and I'll email you a copy of this PowerPoint guide so that you can actually use it. You know what I used to do? I used to write these principles down on a little card, and I would take it, and I would, when I knew I was going to have a difficult conversation with somebody, I'd go back and I'd look at these first. And then when I'd get into conversation, and if I had someone who was trying to draw me off course, or if I felt myself going off course, I would remind myself of those bullet points. Stay on track, stay on track. And it may look ridiculous. Most of the time, they didn't know I was doing it. But I felt kind of silly doing it. But after a while, it got to be a habit and a practice. And hey, conflict wasn't any big deal anymore. It's kind of, hey, this is what we're here for. Let's fix this, So thank you for joining us. I also want to invite you Thursday at 6 o'clock. I'm going to be doing a 20-minute BeLive broadcast on teamwork. And I think the second teamwork principle or quality is how to be a collaborative team player. And I can't remember what teamwork law number 2 was. Let me look here. You think I ought to know this stuff, don't you? Been studying it all week. Well, I've been studying it all my life. Law number 2 was the law of the big picture. The goal was more important than the role. We just talked about that, didn't we? So tune in Thursday, 6 o'clock for 20 minutes. Get your team around the table. Get your kids around the table. Get it plugged in and learn these principles and change the dynamics and the culture of your family and your teams. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you Thursday.
Well, thank you.